how does that number truly make me feel? Honestly, hey there, welcome back to my channel. My name is Melissa. I'm a stay-at-home mom living in Vancouver, Canada. And on my channel, I chat and share everything about my knitting hobby. First and foremost, thank you. Welcome to all the new subscribers. As I said before, my name is Melissa. I live here in Vancouver with my husband, our 3-year-old daughter Darcy, and our very handsome cat Tiberius. Um, I do a monthly podcast and a variety of videos kind of in between, and that's guided by whatever I feel like. I tend to focus on more of the technical or analytical side of knitting, and I also provide project costs. So, again, welcome, and everyone, welcome to the first episode of 2024. I took about a month break from YouTube, and I didn't realize it was going to be a month, but it ended up being a month. And it wasn't that I was feeling any sort of burnout, but with lack of preschool, I don't really have any time to record. So Darcy goes to preschool 3 times a week, and those are pretty much my only opportunities to sit down when it's quiet, uninterrupted, and record content for the channel. So over the holidays, I took a break, had some good quality family time, and yeah, I feel like I need to relearn how to do this because it was long enough that I feel like a total novice again. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started with this month's podcast. So, as a continuation from my Everything I Knit in 2023 video, I wanted to start off today by talking about project costs. So, if you have not seen that video, what I did in that video was provide the project cost for every single item shared. And so that was pattern cost, the cost of the yarn, including taxes and shipping to my location, and if there was any notion such as buttons or snaps. So the grand total for 2023 was $1,561.29. And so that roughly works out to about $130 a month or $65 per item. And in that video, I did not say any or give any indication of my thoughts on that total. So, how does that number truly make me feel? Honestly, not much. Without any data from any previous years or previous projects to compare to, I really can't say if it's a high number or a low number. I also don't have data from other knitters' projects to say. So I also don't share these costs to say or brag about, look how much I spend. It's so much, it's so little. I simply put it out there as a reference, especially for new knitters getting into this hobby. So you can see how much it costs for, one knitter out of the many that are out there. But what I plan on doing is to continue tracking project costs, and by the end of 2024, take that number and compare it to last year's number. And then at that time, I can hopefully provide some more emotion and thoughts, feelings about that number. But in general, I don't feel bad about that number. Um, in addition to tracking project costs, some other financials I'll be looking at for this year is the YouTube revenue or the payments I get. My channel became monetized kind of mid last year. I received my first payment in July. So I have not had a full calendar year of payments. So that's why I haven't really discussed that either because I don't have a full year to compare that to. But I will be looking at how that compares to how much my projects cost, as well as the expenses that I now have for creating content. So I now have a website plan, website domain that I pay for, the cost for my video editing software, for example. Essentially, I'm starting to look at this from more of a business standpoint. Not to say that this is going to be a full-time thing, but I think it's kind of interesting and also somewhat responsible on my end to kind of track these, and also kind of share this with my husband should we need to kind of look closer at what this channel like is or isn't doing. So uh, that's kind of the financial stuff I wanted to cover. But anyway, yeah, don't feel terrible about it. I don't feel really good about it. I'm feeling relatively neutral about that number, but we'll see by the end of this year how I feel. Something else to add in terms of project cost, there is a value that you can't put price on. And for me, that's the value in the experience, the knitting experience itself of, I truly enjoy, sitting down and knitting and creating garments for myself, for my daughter, for other people, making the stuffed animals. So I'm definitely on the side or the team of, you can't put a price on that. Also, I believe what I'm creating are, high quality items that should be long lasting, things that potentially my daughter could inherit, items that I've created for my daughter, which are now kind of sentimental, perhaps can be passed on to other family members, such as my niece, for example. And so, given that the average cost of each item was $65, that makes me feel pretty good. Like I feel pretty good. And I've produced some pretty beautiful items. So let's go ahead and get to kind of the regular portion of a podcast. And so I have no finished objects for you today, but I do have a few whips to update on. So let's get going with, hmm, let's start with the one that has had my attention the most. And if you follow me on Instagram, then you know it is my Haley Genser, or the Haley sweater if you want to say it in English. But that's the name from Sandnes. So the pattern comes out of Sandnes 2111, 2111. Comes out of this booklet here. From what I gather, it's not super accessible for everyone to get this booklet. Here in Canada, at least where I am, we can purchase. This can be purchased individually without having to purchase any Sandnes yarn. And this particular one, I believe I ordered it from Art of Yarn, which is in Kelowna. But in Vancouver, I've seen them at Urban Yarns. I've purchased from Urban Yarns before. I can't remember if Wet Coast Wools has these, but they do sell Sandnes yarn, so most likely they may carry these booklets. This is a bit of an older booklet, so it's going to be a little bit difficult to track this one down. But the pattern comes out of here. I'll give you a quick look at the picture for you guys. So it is an all over cabled textured pattern. And I chose this one because I feel like the motif looks like hot air balloons. And then that leads me to a memory from my childhood. I grew up in Vernon, and for the winter carnival, there's a hot air balloon event, and it's when about a dozen or so hot air balloons kind of just are flown above the city, and that was just always a good memory for me as a kid. It happened every year. I believe it's still happening every year, and it kind of kicks off Winter Carnival in Vernon. So associating a good memory with my knit as well perhaps is increasing the enjoyment too. But honestly, the texture has been really lovely to work on. It is worsted weight yarn, so I feel like results happen quicker as opposed to working with a DK or fingering, for example. But since my last episode in December, so in December, I just had a portion of the back done, and I've been busy. Am I holding it upside down? No. Here we go. I have both sleeves done, and I am probably halfway, maybe more than halfway done the body. So I have, I think, one more pattern repeat to do, and then I'll move on to the ribbing. But before I do the ribbing, I will do another try on. It's a bit tricky, especially with the sleeve length for the try on, because cables after wash and block, they do release, they open up a lot more, which can add length, add width. So I did do kind of a mid project or mid progress blocking, like kind of a lazy way. I did a little bit of a steam to open up this area here of the shoulder and of the sleeve so that I can, you know, hopefully do my best to figure out and knit up the correct sleeve length for me. I expect that the shoulder may open up more, which would add length. However, the sleeve width, this should open up more after a good washing, which would decrease that length. So I'm hoping those two kind of meet in the middle at the length that I want. I did knit up the recommended amount of ribbing, which is twisted rib. It's about 8 centimeters. This is full twisted rib, so you're working through the back loop for knits and the purls. And I think the twisted rib is a really nice contrast to the overall texture. I did consider changing it to a regular 1 by 1 rib, but for the look, I think I prefer the twisted rib just as is in the pattern. I have a lot of stitches going on with this sweater, you may or may not have noticed. Some of them I just haven't moved them and they're just in there. They're not in the way, so I've just left them in. But you can see on the body I have all these colorful markers, and those are just separating the different sections, the different repeats of this pattern. Sorry, the color is going like warm and cool. And it's not necessary, but I like putting them in at the end of each repeat so that I only need to memorize the two different repeats that I'm doing. The pattern is the same, you just add a different point in the repeat so that you have some, like the cable cross here, but this one is not crossed here. So it's just the same repeat, but shifted like this, and that's what's going across the entire sweater. So I like the markers. It might like look a lot, but it makes it a lot easier to just kind of relax, especially in front of the TV, hit a marker. Oh, I'm on that other staggered repeat, so I know what I'm doing here. Another marker, okay, back to the same one as before. So that's just a little bit of how I work with this kind of pattern. And the pattern, I no longer need to look at the chart, so it is provided as a chart. Once I finished the back yoke and then moved on to the front panels, I had the chart memorized, so I don't even need to have the booklet next to me. I know exactly how many stitches, tall, wide. I do mark where the cable crossing happens, and then I know how many stitches after that something else happens. There's a really nice flow to this pattern that my mind has been able to memorize, and I really like that. So this one I will continue to knit on monogamously for the remainder of this month and hopefully have it done before the end of this month. Not that I have a deadline, but I am excited to see this one fully opened up and blocked and wear it before it gets too warm. I forgot to mention the yarn is Cascade 220, the non-superwash, the worsted, and the color is camel. And I picked this color. Normally I used to avoid anything with kind of warm or yellow golden undertones, but I've come to embrace that that's in my skin color. So I believe this is going to be a flattering color for me. In the past, I would have maybe tried to go a bit more brown, less yellow, but yeah, embracing the natural undertones in my skin now. Let's move on to my next whip, which is my Sweet Shop blanket. This is something I was so excited to start on, but because I'm mostly a garment knitter, I of course moved on to garments, and this poor blanket kind of got pushed aside. But over the holidays, I did get some good work, good progress on it, and it's now, here we go, this size. I think last month it was just maybe 6 squares. So I was able to add, wait, I don't know why that took me so long to count that out. I added another 6 squares, I think, if I recall correctly what I had last month. Um, but yeah, not too much to say about this, just kind of slowly working away on it. Um, I found I have less pressure to finish this because I haven't told Darcy that I'm making this for her room. If she knew this was for her, she'd probably be hounding me, which is something she's been kind of doing for a whip I will show you in a few minutes. But I am just kind of randomly, I'm trying to choose colors that aren't too similar together if I can. Like I don't want like two pinks next to each other. Um, but like a green and blue next to each other, like that's okay. But at the end of the day, it's like I'm trying not to be too controlling of it so that I can just knit this without any stress. Like this should be a stress-free knit, and in general it is. The garter stitch feels really squishy and it's nice. So my main color is Cascade 220 Superwash Merino. So they do have a regular Superwash line, but this one is the Merino one, so it's a little bit more expensive. But it's just really nice. I fell in love with this yarn because I used it for my sister's sibling sweater my size that I knit last year. And I just really liked working with it. And given that this is a blanket for my daughter, I wanted to use all superwash yarn. And all the contrasting colors are minis that I purchased at Knit City. I've been trying to be good and kind of weaving in ends and dealing with those as I go. So you can see I've done some work. But that is my Sweet Shop blanket. I have not worked on it at all this month. Not sure when I'm gonna pick it up again, but it's turning into more of a long-term project than I imagine it to be, but that's kind of the nature. That's what happens with blankets, I feel. So it will get done eventually. Luckily, a blanket isn't something that she's necessarily going to grow out of. I intend to make the full size one, so I think that's large enough to fit like a twin size bed, for example. And then just having something cozy for the family to share sitting on the couch is kind of the idea of this one. But there we go, the Sweet Shop blanket. So I'll share with you now the whip that Darcy is really looking forward to, and it is something out of this book here. So Mouche and Friends, and I am making the bear for Darcy. She picked it. I showed her the book, let her know, emphasize that she could pick any animal of her choosing, and no surprise, she's picked the polar bear. She loves polar bears. She carries one around. She's got a stuffy. She carries one around everywhere. She takes it to preschool with her. Um, and so I have made her another polar bear previously, but yeah, so polar bears are her favorite. I can't remember when I cast this one on, but I've been kind of slowly working on it. This one is not as easy to pick up and work on in between like chores and playing with Darcy because it is something that there are some sections that you need to follow the pattern kind of line by line that I haven't memorized, and I haven't made this before either. So it's not as it's not one of those like TV knits really. I guess is the best way to explain. But I've made pretty good progress. It's got the head with, I've got the eyes, and the nose and the mouth are embroidered. Eyes are secured, got the ears in. It looks funny because it's not stuffed, but here you go. You try to stretch it out. Both arms are done, and now I'm on to the body. So should be able to progress a little bit quicker at this point. I'm using 2 millimeter needles, and these are the smallest needles I have ever used. And they feel like I actually did compare these to toothpicks in my kitchen drawer, and they're the same size as a toothpick. So yeah, that's another thing about working with this is I worry about dropping the extra needle and like breaking it, sitting on it. I worry about Darcy poking her eyes out with this one. So it's not as kid friendly that way. Um, and the special thing about all the patterns from this book is that they are knit seamlessly from the top down. And that is a new stuffed animal technique for me. I cannot recall if there's any other books that have knit animals constructed this way. Typically, you construct the head and then the body and the legs all separately and see them together. So that is what really intrigued me and made me want to get this book. And it's been an interesting experience. So, in order to knit seamlessly, there is quite a bit of short row shaping, and they are they wrap and turns? I think they're wrap and turns. I don't have the neatest short rows for whatever reason. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I'm hoping this kind of blocks out because I think it's kind of obvious in the upper portion of the bear. I don't know if I'm going to make the clothes for the bear. We'll see what Darcy says. Um, if she wants clothes, then I, of course, will try to make her the clothes as well. But it's been very cool, like knitting something up like this. It's very fun. And yeah, I hope I can finish this soon. I'm gonna have to impose a deadline in order for me to try to get it done. Maybe once I've done my Haley sweater, this is gonna be my next monogamous knit. And I find that's the only way I can really focus and get things done is I have to ignore the giant pile of whips and just work monogamously. The yarn I'm using is Knit Picks Palette Bear yarn. Bear. I purchased a whole pack of this yarn from Knit Picks last year. And by whole pack, I think the pack has 20 skeins. So I have more than enough. I kind of thought it would just be a good base yarn to have. So the palette yarn is a fingering weight, and it seems very similar to Cascade 220 fingering. I think they in fact are both Peruvian wool. I just remembered something about project costs that I should also mention. So that number, that grand total, that $1,500 or so grand total, doesn't reflect all the yarn I purchased last year. So it's the projects. So some of those projects, some of that yarn I did purchase in 2023, but some of them, that yarn was purchased in 2022. And so in case you're wondering, is that all I spent on yarn? So no, it would be the quick answer. It doesn't include most of the yarn I bought at Flock Fiber Festival, just the Superglue fiber from that visit. And then it doesn't include any of the yarn I bought at Knit City, Vancouver back in September. So that number, if you want to look at amount of yarn or amount I actually spent on yarn, you're gonna have to add a few more $100 to that. Okay, back to the whips. So yes, that's Mouche. The last whip I want to share with you guys today is the Paul sweater, pattern from Moroccan Knit. So I gotta zip this open. Last month I had just the kind of the top, the shoulder, the saddle part done, and a little bit of the back yoke, I believe. And since then I have worked the fronts and joined in the round. So I'm on the body. Let's see. It's quite kind of scrunched up and wrinkly looking, part to because of it's been like stuffed into my project bag, and also I was having some tension issues. I was trying to decide which needle to use, and yeah, when I have to use anything smaller than 4 millimeters and the yarn is like slightly slippery, my tension gets a little off. So hopefully that blocks out. Hopefully. If it doesn't, not a huge deal, but that is a little bit of the issue that you'll see in part of the front. Because what happened is that I purled tighter than I knit. So the front panels, because of the V-neck shaping, it's worked flat. And so I was using two different needle sizes. And then when I joined to work in the round, I didn't use the right needle for the knit because you're just knitting in the round. And so it was a little bit wonky and a little bit loose. And then I realized, and then I had to switch to my like knit needle. And I think I even frogged a few of the rows because they looked so bad. But here we have it. This yarn is from Sunday Fiber Co. And it's one of Elisa's newest bases that she offers now. This is the Aura Sport. This is a 50% Surrey and 50% Merino blend, and it is really lovely. It's got a good, nice drape, which is, I think, from the alpaca. I find alpaca has a better drape than wool, and it's got the kind of fuzzy halo. I don't know if you can see that. I believe that also comes from the Surrey. The real test will be whether my skin like feels, or like, is this going to be prickly on my skin, because I have a little bit of sensitivity to texture. Not like fiber. I don't have any fiber allergies, but it's the texture. So hopefully the Surrey is soft enough for me. This is a pretty, like, has a generous amount of positive E, so it's an oversized fit is what I've gone for. I've gone for a size bigger than I would normally choose, just because I wanted that like big flowy. I don't know, I'm gonna try it. Don't normally pick things with a lot of positives, but I'm trying this style. Oh, and the color is called Rosewood, which I don't know if Elise is going to offer this color again. This one was a batch from her Knit City sale. So I didn't buy it at Knit City, but she had it there and I didn't realize it, so I had to buy it after online. And it's just a really lovely kind of rosy orange, reddish terracotta color. Again, reaching for those kind of golden undertones to go with my skin tone. So this is a saddle shoulder construction. It's a bit of a tongue twister for me. So you have the two saddles that come out. So those are the two portions of fabric that come out. And then those portions will be seamless down the sleeve. But then there are kind of like, looks like seams here where stitches will have to be picked up for the arms. So here's the end of the saddle here, and then the armhole. I think I'm nearing to the point where I stop stockinette and move on to ribbing. Oh yeah, so I have one marker. This is what I do so I don't have to look at my instructions. So in terms of knowing how long to knit something, a pattern will say knit until garment measures X amount of inches or centimeters. I don't measure my work. I reference my gauge swatch. And then based on my gauge swatch and the length provided in the pattern, that's how I know I'll mark off every 10 rounds or rows, and then that's how I kind of keep track. And then say I need to knit 100 rounds, then I will have 10 stitches, and I'll leave the actual amount of stitch markers on my work, so that I know I need to knit until the stitch markers run out, and then at which point I go back and look at the instructions to see what I have to do next. But yeah, I don't measure my live work. I might measure it just as a reference, just to be sure that it's not wildly off gauge, but you're not going to really know because this hasn't been washed yet. So that is how I deal with the measurements and how much length to knit in a project. I still got a skein here, so I can give you guys a close-up of this one again. And here I am, just stuff it back in. But all the skeins and my notebook and my whip fit in my Mood Excel, which just stays at home. I knit mostly at home, so otherwise I have learned that this, like carrying this as a bag that doesn't collapse and the size of this like feels like a barrel, it's really not that comfortable to walk around with. So this is more of a transportation bag, not a I'm gonna wear this out bag. Oh, and I didn't show this. I have the mini. This is the mini one. That's all the whips I have to update you guys on for this month. I have not done any new cast-ons, yay! Because I still have there's still Whip Mountain, and that's okay. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to have new cast-ons. Don't feel guilty about it. You follow the creative path. So before I leave you guys, I've had, a few questions about elastic thread. So I'm gonna just quickly show you some elastic thread based on questions I had from my Everything I Knit video. I am planning to do a separate instructional video for a knitting elastic, but I'm going to show you guys what I use for those curious. So I have two types of elastic thread that I've used and that I would recommend. Whether these are like the best ones to use, I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't have the packaging for this one anymore, but this is actual knitting elastic. It is in a transparent thread, which is 100% lycra. Stretchy. If you are in Vancouver, I purchased this from Dresso on Hastings Street, downtown. This is a thread that you can hold with your work, your yarn, and knit it into your project. That is something I did with the top of the neckline of my Friday tee, just to kind of experiment. And because it's transparent, you really can't see it, and it's so fine as well. I do find though, when it comes time to tie a knot in, like when you're done and you've got through your neckline, if you pull too hard, it does snap and break. So just be mindful of that. Be a little bit gentle. And I always like to do at least 3 knots to secure it. So that's knitting elastic. The brand that I have here is unique. Prim, Prym, also has a knitting elastic. But really, you're just looking for something that is a thread made out of 100% lycra. The other elastic I recommend is shirring elastic. This one I've just picked up from one of my local sewing shops, a spool of thread. Just look for shirring elastic and you'll find this. It comes in different colors, like usually white and black. I just have some white here. And this is what I used in my Audrey dress. This is the thread that is running through the I-cord straps around the armhole and then tied secure. I find this one, when you tie the knot, you can be a little bit more, I don't want to say aggressive, but I haven't found this one to snap. This one is quite strong. It is something that you put in the bobbin of a sewing machine and actually sew it into the fabric. So those are the two elastics that I use. The downside of shirring elastic that it's not transparent, so you have to be a little bit more careful how you weave it into your work. But there you go, elastics. And that brings us to the end of this podcast episode. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Again, thank you to all the new subscribers. Happy to have you here. Until next time, happy knitting. Bye.